Alright, so this is going to be recording for pod 44, I guess, and today I'm going to finally discuss in more detail the Rafael Devers trade, which, spoiler alert, it's Saturday, June 21st at 4:55 p.m., and Raffy just hit a two-run home run, I think, off the Red Sox. So, you know, he hit his home run. He was 0 for 5 in the first game. Chapman strikes him out after kind of a prolonged at-bat. All very good theater. But right now, what I'm interested in discussing is essentially my various opinions on this trade, the background to it, sort of my opinions on the situation overall. So I think I should just lay my cards on the table right now and say I think the Rafael Devers trade was, on the balance of it, not a good idea, and that is my opinion. I understand that certainly seems like in the world of empirical reality I might be disproven along a lot of different lines, and there's a good argument to be made that my reaction to this is more emotional maybe than logical, but I just think that the trading of Raffy Devers was certainly not handled the right way. I don't think they really did a good job in terms of getting maximum value for somebody, and therefore not really properly managing the assets of the franchise. And that'll be part of this discussion. Is, I guess, I'm gonna do a little bit of a deep dive of what I think has gone a little bit awry with the Boston Red Sox in terms of their willingness or lack thereof to where'd my internet go? I think I have too much data going on the computer. That's my fault. But anyway, so I was just going to roll through this really quickly, and I think one opinion that can be stated fairly easily is that I think there was a level of insensitivity on the side of the Red Sox that has, I think in my opinion, really it defines how you need to look at the situation overall. And I just think, first of all, what's the point of re-signing him to such a large contract if a year later you guys are going to essentially be crowing about how much money you're saving by trading him away? It's just, it's a little stupid, and at the time it was at least viewed as a sign that the team was more serious long-term about continuing to try and compete at a high level, which is certainly what I came to expect of the Boston Red Sox, but in recent years, frankly, has not been the case. And so I think there's something to really discuss here, and I'm looking at the stats right now and it's already making me mad, so I want to just start and go through this here. So we're going to do a little bit of a profile of both Raffy Devers, some of the teams that he played on, and kind of look around and see circumstances and try to look at these things as holistically as possible. So so in 2025, Raffy is hitting .267. He has 15 home runs. He's driven in 59 runs. He has a .395 on-base percentage and a .490 slug. So .395 on base plus .490 slug equals for the season an .884-ish OPS, which is essentially the measure of somebody's individual value at bat to kind of how many bases you expect them to get. And Raffy's 884, that's fairly close to 1. That's solid numbers, and his wins above replacement is 2.3, playing primarily as a DH in Boston until they traded him. But to give him some of his career accolades, 3-time All-Star, 2018 World Series champ, 2-time Silver Slugger, and so then for his career, he's got 24.8 wins above replacement. He's gone to the plate about 4,100 times. He has a little over 1,100 hits, 215 home runs. He's batting .278 for his career, .349 on-base percentage, .509 slug. So an .858 OPS for his career. And if you look at his career statistics, kind of go through a profile of his entire career. All right, so in 2017, Raffy was 20 when he first came up to the Red Sox, and it looks like he played 58 games. He hit 10 home runs with 30 RBIs. He batted .284 with a .338 on-base percentage, .482 slug. So, I mean, really, he kind of came into the majors not fully formed, but producing at a high level immediately. He had .7 WAR in 60 games, and if you multiply those 60 games by about 3, that's 180 games, and so, that's about a 30 home run, 90 RBI clip, 14 doubles in that time, etc. Then the next year, on the 2018 Red Sox that won the World Series, he goes for .4 WAR, plays 121 games, 108 hits, 24 doubles, and 59 runs scored, 21 homers, 66 RBIs. Batting average goes down to .240, on-base percentage .298, .433 slug, so not a excellent second year, but still solid. And then 2019, obviously his best season, goes for 5.4 WAR in 156 games. He goes to the plate 702 times. He scores 129 runs, 201 hits, 54 doubles, 32 homers, 115 RBI, 48 walks for batting .311, .361, and .555 slug. So that's Raffy's best year in terms of 2019 from a statistical perspective. Then the next year in 2020, during the COVID season, plays 57 games, 11 homers, 43 RBIs, 263, 310, 483. So he just kind of chalk that up as a COVID year and not make too much of a fuss about it. But, the numbers went down for that year, but then the next year they're back up for a 3.6 WAR season, 37 doubles, 38 homers, 113 RBIs, 62 walks, so 279 average, 352 on-base percentage, 538 slug for an 890 OPS. So we're talking excellent statistics here, and as an all-star that year. They go to the playoffs, have their little run. 2022, 4.5 WAR, 164 hits, 42 doubles, 27 homers, 88 RBI, 295 batting average, 358 on base, 521 slug for an 879 OPS. So then the next year, 2023, 3.5 WAR, 33 homers, 100 RBIs, 271, 351, 500. Then 2024, this is last year, good for 3.7 WAR, 143 hits, 34 doubles, 28 homers, 83 RBI, 272, 354, 516. So then obviously he gets traded this year after hitting 15 home runs and 58 RBIs for the Red Sox, and now he's got one more home run for the Giants. But clearly, by hitting 272, 401, 504 in his time with the Red Sox, he was certainly on his way to having one of the best seasons of his career. And this is just one of the things that frankly makes me a little angry that the Red Sox were willing to trade this guy, because so when you look at his career path, you definitely say after a first season where he bursts onto the scene, does really well in 17, that by the time, 18, 19, if you put those together, you say, one excellent season, one, not so great season. But you certainly say this is a guy who's trending upward, who's able to perform at a pretty spectacular level. I guess some argument could be made at this point, though, that the beginning of Raffy's run as a really good player was also kind of coincident with the beginning of the Red Sox decline in terms of the recent history of the franchise after 2018, where, when you win 108 games, you don't necessarily expect for the next season to kind of go down the drain necessarily, but I believe that in 2019 the Red Sox won I don't know how many games they won that year, but I think they won like 80 some games. And that was the beginning of the sort of they won 84 games that year, finished third. And so I think, and then Dave Dombrowski's still the president, no GM for the team. So it's clearly a different era. And you definitely would have said with the guys that were on this team, they still had Mookie, Xander Bogaerts. They have young Raffy Devers. They still have JD Martinez, Christian Vasquez, Jackie Bradley Jr. They still have Chris Sale, Benintendi. They haven't traded David Price yet, etc. And so, to come off the season before, where obviously they had won 108 games, finished first in the AL East, lose 3 combined games in the playoffs, and running over 3 teams that won 100 games and winning fairly easily. I guess some argument could be made that in 2019 the wheels fell off, but it was only an 84 win season. I think there was a bit of an overreaction to the place that the team was at the time, but so I've gone through Raffy's career stats, and obviously overall, if you look at it from an unbiased perspective, and this is before you get into considerations of how good he is as a fielder, which, when is that ever the primary concern for a baseball player who's a genuine superstar? Very rarely. But I think, so if I look back at some of those teams like that 2021 Red Sox team, and you look at the lineup that they had, I'm pretty sure, in addition to the guys I just mentioned, you're also going to have Kyle Schwarber on that team. So, yeah, and they also had Nate Eovaldi at the time. So that's another one that they sort of jettisoned off. At this point in 21, they've got Verdugo and no longer have Mookie, but they still have Xander Bogaerts. They've still got, and this shows the top players by WAR. So, yeah, for 2021, obviously Xander Bogaerts led the way with a 5.2 WAR. Kike Hernandez had 4.9. Nate Eovaldi 4.3. Raffy Devers 3.6. JD Martinez 3.2. Garrett Whitlock 2.9, Nick Pivetta 2.5, Hunter Renfroe 2.4, Verdugo 2.2, Eduardo Rodriguez 1.6, etc. So if you look at this team for their top 12 players, you can see that they had a very sort of solid, very solid team and lineup. Let's see. Yeah, even Duran was on that team somehow. But that's just to say basically that for those teams that one team that went to the ALCS and lost, and then trying to look at the 2013 team as well to kind of get a little bit of a run through of that lineup. So yeah, 2013 is Dustin Pedroia, Shane Victorino, Jacoby Ellsbury, David Ortiz, Clay Buchholz. You got Mike Napoli, you got Koji Uehara, you got Daniel Nava on that team, Jared Saltalamacchia, Steven Drew, John Lester, John Lackey, etc. So I think one thing you can start to notice, especially from that World Series winning team, which I think I heard the other day that it was like Bill Simmons saying that this team kind of lucked into a World Series, and that kind of bothers me because they won 97 fucking games that year, and maybe make the argument that Detroit Tigers team they won over in the ALCS was better than them, who, you know, with Scherzer and with Verlander at the same time. But still, I think that, you know, that 97 win 2013 Red Sox team, it just gets diminished a little bit by the fact that the 07, 04, and 18 teams were all superior to this team. But it's a little ridiculous in my opinion to kind of dismiss that team as if it's as if they lucked their way into a World Series. I mean, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. And then to take a peek through the roster of the 2018 World Series. So for pitchers, they got Matt Barnes, Ryan Brazier, Nathan Eovaldi, Heath Hembry, Joe Kelly, Craig Kimbrell, Drew Pomeranz, Rick Porcello, David Price, Eduardo Rodriguez, Chris Sale. For catchers, they have Sandy Leon, Blake Swihart, Christian Vasquez. They have Bogarts, Devers, Brock Holt, Ian Kinsler, Mitch Moreland, Eduardo Nunez, Steve Pearce in the infield, and Andrew Benintendi, Mookie Betts, Jackie Bradley Jr., and JD Martinez in the outfield. And so I think the point of me going through these sort of roster lists when I'm talking about the Raffy Devers trade, so part of what irritates me about them doing this trade is I'm looking through Raffy's career stats, and it's just so evidently clear and obvious that he was providing substantial value for the Boston Red Sox from 2017 on. I don't want to hear about a rookie season. Like, he burst onto the scene and within 1 to 3 years was a star. And so my biggest problem is, you know, there is this sort of thinking, I guess, in sports now that the primary value you're ever going to get for somebody who's a true star like Devers is that you're gonna get them for the beginning of their career and hopefully let go of them before they sort of before they fall off. And I just think with him being 28, the idea of us thinking about him falling off, you know, frankly, it's your fault for giving him a 10-year contract. Why didn't you give him an 8-year contract? Like, you can quibble about those things really easily, and I think that it's slightly bothersome to me that that a team would look at a Raffy Devers and say, yeah, no, we're good. We've had enough, you know. Him hitting 200 home runs for the Red Sox. So, you know, 215 home runs, 696 RBIs, slugging or on base plus slugging at 860 for his career, and you're telling me that trading this guy makes the team better. I'm sorry, I don't friggin' believe that. And I guess to put it into even more context, you could say that there's sort of a Ewing theory potential of a team trades its best player, or their best player goes down with injury, and all of a sudden the team makes a mad charge towards whatever the playoffs are, championship, win or lose, whatever. That's sort of a theory, and I guess somebody's going to try to make the argument that the Red Sox this year are sort of trying to embody the Ewing theory by not necessarily trading their best player, because I think it's pretty clear that Bregman became their best player once they signed him, once the signing of him essentially results in Raffy Devers being bumped off of his position for good, etc., etc., etc. I think the whole situation of that was not properly handled, because just from a strategic perspective, in my opinion, if you have Raffy Devers on your team and you're thinking about moving him from third base, I literally mentioned this in one of my earlier podcasts. This is one of the things that kind of makes me mad, is I already pointed this out, is that if you're going to move him off third base, it's not necessarily a bad idea, but you want to carefully consider how best to do that. You don't just want to have the fucking analytics department telling you, it's like, he's a bad fielder. It's like, no shit, Sherlock. We know this. We're not blind. We see. It's not like we don't understand that Raffy was a negative in the field. But and I'm looking at the stats now, and it looks like so runs from fielding, he's minus 61 for his career. And so, I think you can put together some sort of statistical argument for why he wasn't worth the money, or the offensive stats essentially overshadow the negative that comes from the defense. And the reason, I just don't buy that for a wide variety of reasons, but one of the main reasons I don't really buy that sort of line of thinking is that, right, there were options. First of all, he was playing designated hitter and playing it well. Now, if you want to complain about that and essentially say, well, we wanted him to DH, but now that we have him there, we realize it's kind of a waste to have him DH, because a DH is really, in the modern MLB, seems to be more so about being able to platoon guys off of their in the field positions so that they can have games where they only DH, and that gives them a little bit more relative rest and recovery. And so, the Red Sox and any other team are arguably not really incentivized to pay huge money to a designated hitter, because you can have multiple people in that role, and then if you have one person solidified in the role, it maybe reduces the flexibility of the organization overall. I think that's a legitimate point to make, but I think, and this is why I went through sort of Raffy's list of teammates since he came into the league, of, I think, like the last year of David Ortiz when he came up, and then being on that 18 team, and then 19 blossoming as a superstar, and then after the COVID shortened year, he's done nothing but perform for the last 4 years in a row, averaging, about 34 home runs a year, around 100 RBI. Like, this is the sort of thing you want in the lineup. And I think, when it came across the wire that the Red Sox had signed Alex Bregman, my thought process was essentially, Alex Bregman, I hope that they can convince him to play somewhere else. Maybe he becomes the Gold Glove second baseman that Alex Cora sort of speculated about. And currently Bregman's hurt, but when he was playing really well. So I don't want to rag on that signing too much, but I think him being hurt is not a positive for that. And I think him being hurt, them needing a third baseman, and I don't know if it's that they asked Raffy to go back to third, and Raffy, the thing about this situation that kind of irritates me, and this is where I think I sympathize with Raffy slightly more from a personal perspective on this matter, is, if you have your employer and they ask you to do something, and it's essentially something that's making you go out of your way, where, you're Raffy Devers and you basically say, I'm third baseman, which is exactly what he did say. When they asked him about moving positions, it's like, well, what position do you think I play here, bud? And he had his whole argument of basically, like, my feng shui of being a baseball player and delivering to you the wins above replacement that I have over the years is tied up in the fact that I play third base. And you might say, well, that's illogical. What does playing third base have to do with hitting? But his explanation was essentially that the cardio he got from doing infield, outfield, and fielding his position was, he thought, vitally important for him. And when you hear it explained that way, it's like, yep, I can totally see why that's sort of a legitimate point and something that would be a real consideration for somebody like that. No, the counter to that would be, that's not a strong enough consideration to leave him at third base forever. Essentially, I think it was inevitable that they were going to move him off third base at some point. I think that the mistake that was made in moving him off third base was not even moving him off third base, because I think installing Bregman at third base was the right move. Bregman is the better third baseman, although he's made his share of errors this year, but everybody agrees that he's a better fielder. And Raffy, after the slow start, had kind of gotten his hitting act together. I know he had like 11 RBI in one game, so the stats are slightly skewed, but you can see in the at-bats he was taking in Boston, especially once he got his act together, that he was hitting exactly the way he's been hitting the last few years, which is kind of typical of a guy who's kind of scraping that 900 OPS level. He's not exactly an Aaron Judge, but his relative presence in the lineup, I think, makes things easier for his teammates around him, relieves pressure on them. I mean, I was watching the game yesterday or the other day for the Red Sox, and whereas Raffy used to be a fixture near the top of the lineup, now all of a sudden the Red Sox have Roman Anthony hitting third, and I hope Roman Anthony is as good as they project, but that's an awful lot of pressure for a 21-year-old to be hitting third, and it's also a bit of a statement on the relative lack of strength of the lineup, that essentially you don't have a more premium player to install into that number 3 position in the lineup, that number 4 position in the lineup. And that's, I think, the thing that you go back and you think about the 07 team, the 04 team, and the 18 team, to slightly set aside the 13 team for a second, but you think about those other 3 teams, and you think about up and down the lineup, good hitters, and if not necessarily the best hitters, like necessarily, you could think of like a Mark Bellhorn as somebody who might hit low 200s, but still hits like 17 home runs a year. And so there's value all up and down that lineup. Jason Varitek, good hitting catcher. Some of these nuances of how they were able to cobble together lineups where kind of guy after guy, you had a confidence with the Red Sox when they were at the plate that they could score a lot of runs. And, frankly, having watched the last few games, this lineup is obviously much more akin to the 2013 lineup in terms of it's much more of a compilation and a hodgepodge of different elements thrown together that wouldn't necessarily work in other contexts, like, Abraham Toro hitting near 300 while playing first base, to where it's like, how long is that going to last necessarily? How well are the Red Sox going to play if they're going to have their sort of big three prospects of Marcelo Meyer, Roman Anthony, Christian Campbell's back in Worcester. Good thing we gave him an 8-year, $60 million contract. I mean, what was the friggin' rush in that regard in terms of such a long-term, seemingly cheap deal? And that's part of the other thing that's been irritating me about the Raffy Devers trade is people are trying to rationalize it in terms of the money they got off their books, as if the Red Sox aren't supposed to spend premium level money on a baseball team, as if the Red Sox are a Pittsburgh Pirates type organization. I just think that's a bad mindset to have. That's not the mindset I want the Red Sox to have, and so that would be very disappointing if the Red Sox were to start acting like a franchise that doesn't exist in a major city, that doesn't pack the house, because I'll say this right here and right now, if the Red Sox suck, I don't know why anybody should go watch them play. These pro sports teams are a big part of the culture, but fundamentally their job is to win. If they're not winning and they're not playing compelling baseball, I don't know why people should spend their hard-earned money going to the games. And so that means the team kind of has to earn the trust of the fans, and one of the ways you earn that trust is you spend a more appropriate amount of money on the team overall over the years. And so this is time for me to, I guess, move off of the purely Raffy Devers sort of line of thinking here and talk about the Red Sox more generally speaking, because I've been really disappointed since the 2018 World Series in terms of the way that they failed to invest properly in that team. I guess one sort of argument that you could make for that would be they pushed all their chips to the center. They won 108 games. They did that. Then by winning 84 games the next year, they demonstrated the team wasn't sustainable in that form long term, and so they had to reset, and the best way to reset was to ship out the money of the David Price and the upcoming Mookie Betts contracts. And I just think, first of all, the return they got for those two guys was terrible, and the other mistake that they made was paying Chris Sale seemingly a year ahead of schedule, because he had put so much on the line to help them win that World Series in 2018. A lot like Kurt Schilling in that regard, of being a star level pitcher, and then unfortunately, being in the position where it's kind of incumbent upon you to put your body on the line to win a World Series and all that sort of stuff, and so they invest in him. That ends up being just a poor investment for the team overall. I think you can say that they didn't recoup good value once they re-signed Chris Sale, because his payroll salary in 2018 was $12.5 million. So obviously he was going to get a raise after that. But, I'm just looking at the 2018 active roster payroll, and we're going to sort of roll through with this to the present really quickly. But obviously David Price sort of headlines that payroll at $30 million a year, and then they had JD Martinez with a $23.75 million contract, Rick Porcello $21,125, Craig Kimbrell $13 million, Chris Sale $12.5, Ian Kinsler $11, Mookie Betts $10.5, Drew Pomerantz 8'5", Xander Bogaerts 7, Mitch Moreland 6'5", 6'2", 5 for Steve Pearce, 6'1" for Jackie Bradley Jr. So you look, and then obviously the other thing is Dustin Pedroia is on this payroll at 16.125, and would have loved to have seen him on this team, but that's obviously not the way it went out, and that's why they went and got Ian Kinsler at $11 million. And so, this is a team, I would assume their revenue that year was a little more than half what they paid for that. And so part of the question, I guess, from a financial perspective is when your salary numbers get to the point where the luxury tax that you're paying ends up being somewhat exorbitant, essentially, because then you roll on 2019 active payroll, it's up to 229. David Price is up to $31 million. They still have JD Martinez on salary for $23.75. Rick Porcello is still there. Mookie Betts is on arbitration too for $20.1 million. That obviously would have gone up and eaten a lot of the salary cap, and so part of what you kind of observe by looking at that is the 2018 team, which I think is one of the best baseball teams of all time, wasn't one of these Yankees teams where they have a max level player at every position. They had a lot of guys before their contracts, and so I think there's a good argument to be made that there wasn't going to be an opportunity to keep the entirety of this team together, whether you're talking about Nate Eovaldi at $17 million, Mookie Betts, Xander Bogaerts, Jackie Bradley Jr., Christian Vasquez, who eventually left and is still playing in the majors, JD Martinez playing at such a high level in terms of salary, but, in terms of, his output, he was a great hitter, but obviously from a fielding perspective, it's not the same. Then 2020, there's obviously a sort of the adjustment period of them, being, having a much lower payroll, and I think COVID is involved with this, so their payroll is $84 million. I think, yeah, it's pretty clear they had just, other than Dustin Pedroia, they had gotten rid of a lot of dead money, although there's still a fair amount of it left on thing, but obviously their payroll is down a bit in 2020, but then to fast forward back to real time, so 2021, then they're up to $186 million. You got Chris Sale still on the payroll at $30 million. You've got Xander, I think in the middle of one of his re-signings where they signed him for the 4 years, 120, so he's making 20, and I consider that fair for sort of his value. And then JD Martinez still there at 19.35. They still have Eovaldi, so obviously this is not the same team. And then they have Raffy Devers making 4.75. Then 2022, you've got Xander, JD, Nathan Eovaldi. Raffy Devers is now arbitration 2 at $11.2 million. So obviously his value is starting to ascend. And then, not to pick on him, but Alex Verdugo is at $3.5 million a year and is not going to get paid any more than that by the Red Sox. And so that's just to say that the Red Sox, then their payroll the next year, 2023, $180 million. So the payroll's obviously been going down. Now you have Trevor Story in the mix as well. Raffy Devers is now making 19.318, so I think that's like probably his last year of arbitration money. They've got a closer in Kenley Jansen. They've got a lot of money out to Masataka Yoshida for some ridiculous reason. And I lied. Verdugo's making $6.3 million from arbitration, so he did get more money from the Red Sox. So yeah, but then 2024, $188 million. So payroll's a bit higher, but obviously Trevor Story and Masataka Yoshida, his salary is $18.6 million, and so I think when you look at this roster in 2024, you say, well, they're paying a lot of money for Trevor Story and Masataka Yoshida. They're making relatively little difference from sort of what you would expect in terms of just providing value for the team. But anyway, then for in order to 2025, now it's 191,117, and so I think the argument that I guess ownership would make would essentially be that 2013 to be at 172, 170, 183. Yeah, so it was really only in 2016 when they did the horrendous things of signing Hanley and Panda that things went a little sideways in terms of them spending so much money. Then 2017 rolls around, they're still spending a shit ton of money, and I think that's what ultimately culminates in 2018. And then that's kind of why, obviously, I guess that after them paying $229 in 2019, they didn't feel comfortable continuing to pay for this team. But so Bregman will continue to be on this team as long as he wants, and then Garrett Crochet, they've got him under contract, and they've got Walker Buehler at a high level, so yeah, that's kind of a problem, is that for next year they're essentially locked into a $195 million payroll, and as far as I'm concerned, the value for that is not excellent, but we'll see what they're able to do for the rest of the season, because I frankly didn't have the most amount of confidence in. It's fucking ridiculous. But, so I guess the long and short of what I'm saying here is, for those teams that were, obviously, they were paying more money for those teams, I think that part of the result of that is you had better lineups where you had guys up and down the lineups where essentially you can incorporate a young guy onto those teams more easily and help them in their development, because essentially they're able to thrive within their role without having an excessive amount of pressure to perform right away. So you can have a situation, and I'll just cite the two. One is Xander Bogaerts in 2013, where he comes up to the team and he plays a bit of third base for the playoff run, plays sort of an important role in that playoff run, playing third base, and then over the subsequent years, they try to keep him at third base, and I think the reasoning for it is they never really believed Xander was going to be a good fielding shortstop, which, long and short of it, he was never an excellent fielding shortstop. And I think the Red Sox may come to a similar conclusion about Marcelo Meyer at some point, which is why I think they're playing him at third base right now. But I think the difference was, so with Xander on those teams the next couple of years after they had won the World Series in 13, again, a bit of a surprise that they won that year. And so the next few years, I think they inhibited Xander's development by essentially forcing him to play third base longer than he needed to. And once he was installed at shortstop, make your gripes about fielding if you want. But I think that all of a sudden the Red Sox finally had a rock solid hitting shortstop, which we hadn't really had installed on the team since Nomar was in his prime. And so it was always fun to see Xander play like that. And when they re-signed Xander, that 4-year deal, I was excited about that. When they signed Trevor Story, I frankly thought that might be a good idea too. I didn't maybe consider in the Colorado aspect of things enough, but I thought it would be a good deal. And then I just think the Trevor Story deal has turned out not to be a good deal, has turned out to be a misappropriation of resources. I think it would have been better to have spent those resources on Xander Bogaerts, because I think Xander, it wouldn't have taken $28 or $26 million a year to re-sign him to the Red Sox. It just would have taken maybe, 23, 24 million. Maybe you get him for 6 years instead of you're not signing him for 8 years. But I think there was flexibility there that they didn't retain on purpose because they wanted the payroll to come down. And I just think if the Red Sox are going to be cheap again, they better be gearing up to do something for real. But when you trade Raffy Devers, it is basically a sign that you're waving the white flag on this season. Not that it's impossible for you to win, but it's like if you win, it's because of the addition by subtraction element. It's not because the team is better without Raffy. It's because there are guys essentially stepping up to fill in his wins above replacement without necessarily having the defensive liabilities to go along with it, and then the team is slightly more balanced. But to get to a point that I wanted to make earlier, I always thought the value of Raffy, especially again, you look at his statistics, he's about a .85 OPS guy, and I thought that the value of that is just that in the playoffs, when you saw him at the plate, you always thought we were going to get good value from this Raffy Devers at bat. He has a good eye. He has fairly good plate discipline, not excellent plate discipline, and then he's got power. He hits the ball hard. He gets extra base hits a lot. He does things hitting, stepping up in big moments, facing the Yankees. And them trading him after he hits a home run to help the Red Sox beat the Yankees 2-0, and he hits this home run over the monster. And to link this back to Xander Bogaerts a little bit, I think that Xander as sorry, I had to go grab something, but long story short, I think I was seeing, in the first couple games with Raffy that he hit one ball to the left center field wall that probably would have been a home run in Fenway Park that was caught at the wall by Rafaela. And there were a couple other things where I was basically like, man, Raffy, in the same sense of Xander, they had swings that I think were pretty well optimized for Fenway Park. You make your arguments about left-handed hitters are essentially never optimized for Fenway Park. And then you sort of run into the counterexamples of Ted Williams, Carl Yastrzemski, David Ortiz, etc. And you have to concede the point. And so I think Raffy was certainly in that discussion in terms of left-handed power hitters fitting in at Fenway Park. And I think part of it was the ability for Raffy Devers to get extra base hits by hitting the ball the other way to left center field. And that's obviously to be a little more difficult in San Francisco. So, but this pod is running a little long, so I'm just gonna bring it to a pause there by saying I really thought that Xander and Raffy were I thought they were ideal Red Sox. I loved watching them play for the Red Sox, Mookie as well, but certainly disappointing to see that the two of them are not finishing their careers with the Red Sox, and in my opinion are not being put in the best positions to succeed, because I thought that position was in Boston, and it's honestly a little disappointing to see the team seemingly being a little cheap and not being willing to pay for some of these franchise icons to finish their careers kind of the way they started, by playing good baseball for the Red Sox. So that's all I have to say, other than looking at Cedar Rafaela's contract. No, that's not the bad one. Alright, I'm just going to pause right here. Alright, thanks.